Thank you so much. Namaskar. It really warms my heart and inspires me to be with you. You have upheld modern and ancient, modern science and ancient knowledge. And this has been my privilege and honor to work under the great leadership of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi from the Vedic tradition to open my own mind and understand the dimensions of life that are open to us. There is, of course, the physical level in wellness. We want to have good diet, good exercise, prevent things from disease, balanced nutrition, live in accordance with the rhythms of nature, and live a life that is in accordance with its purpose, with the goals of life. And life has a meaning, it has a plan, a purpose, it has an understanding from different perspectives. And the ancient knowledge of Veda and Vedic literature offer us very many venues of improving ourselves from the physical as well as the mental. What has been really a discovery for me, and I'd like to share with you briefly this evening and discuss, is the fact that our perception of reality is very relative. When you are sleeping, you have no sense of anything, but your body is detecting all kinds of changes in the environment, inside and outside, and adjusting itself, clearing away stresses and strains and fatigue. But the awareness is very limited. In dream state, we have a state of illusion. The mind goes through visions and aspects that are not real. As we know, the tiger of the dream state cannot be killed by the rifle of the waking state. And the same, the rifle of the waking state cannot do except what is possible to do in the waking state, and vice versa for the dream. So therefore, we have different realities of awareness that we go through in different states of consciousness. Ultimately, in the waking state, we discover that we have different layers of understanding. These layers depend on the alertness of the mind. If we are fully alert, we can see more things. If we are rested, we are able to fathom different details of life and make better choices. So our ability to live a better life also depends on our level of awareness. And at the same time, how much awareness is settled and able to have broad comprehension. And even during the waking state, we examine reality from different perspectives. There is the reality on the sensory level. The sun rises in the east and settles in the west. That's what we see, and that's why many people throughout the ages believe that it's the sun that is moving, whereas the earth is stable, it doesn't move, it is sitting there. So that is the sensory perception. But then there is the intellectual analysis that makes us find that this doesn't fit with what we see as reality in terms of the planetary motions and different calculations. And we find that ultimately it's the Earth that rotates around its axis, creating the illusion that the sun is moving from east to west. Some of the most fundamental aspects of what we call reality are space and time. We see time on the clock flowing very sequentially, and we see space very rigid, very well defined as we defined it in miles or kilometers or meters or inches. And this is very rigid. As scientists went deeper into reality, they found that, in fact, even space and time are relative and it depends on the speed at which you are going. And this is not a fantasy. This is something that has been evidence-based, calculated, measured, and tried through satellite functions and through different realities, which is based on, as we know, some of the Einstein's general and special relativity theories that even define gravity in terms of space-time continuum and space-time geometry, and so that space and time are actually connected. As scientists delve deeper into nature, they find that it's not atoms that make reality, but atoms themselves are made out of elementary particles, and the elementary particles are made out of themselves vibrations, fluctuations of fields, and the fields of different forces, with 4 different major forces: the weak, the strong, the gravitational, and the electromagnetic force. And gradually, as they looked deeper into nature, they found more and more unifying values, and these forces are more and more unified to such an extent that today we have a theory of a unified field that is the source of all that is on the surface. So there is actually one field, that is what scientists contemplate, to be the source of all what we see, and that the expressions of this field are vibrations that lead to appearance of atoms and molecules and cells and the body and the nervous system and the environment and society and the whole thing. In the ancient Vedic knowledge, this is the same reality that is being described as there is one field of consciousness, Satchit Ananda, a field of pure being, of pure self, that manifests in the reality of life as all the different expressions. And there is the notion of Maya, which says that everything on the outside is an illusion. Now, this notion of Maya has been actually misinterpreted in some ways, because people think that the illusions that we see on the outside is like really the illusions that we have in the dream. And to some extent, it is true, because our nervous system, our ability to see things, is limited with the limitation of our perception, which means we see only light from red to violet. We don't see infrared, we don't see ultraviolet, except if we use instruments. We don't see the workings of the atoms and the molecules, except if we use a microscope. And even if we go deeper, these are things that we don't have even instruments to analyze, but the scientists have found quantum fields that are completely different than the reality that we seem to assume on the surface level, in which actually particles can be at different places at the same time, that the consciousness of the observer collapses what appears to be the wave function, which is the probability of having a particle in different places, and that there is an interaction between the observer, the process of observation, and the object being observed. These things are baffling scientists, and they are making really the scientists open their awareness to realities that they have never imagined before. This brings us back to what is true reality. Having researched true reality, many physicists, the top physicists in the world, those who have discovered these fields, such as Schrödinger and Planck and the top scientists in the world, if you read what they say that having researched the physical reality in life, in their life, they found that actually at the basis of all that is physical, there is something that is not physical. And they seem to believe, and they say it, that it is consciousness. So this brings us back to a very important aspect of something we have assumed to be true all through, because our senses have shown us this, and that is, it is matter that is the source of everything. Even scientists started to believe that it's the matter that is the source of consciousness, and in the past 25 years, They have been really trying to find a theory, a way, a system that could explain that, but it's completely unsuccessful. There is not even a hint in science today of how consciousness emerges from something physical. And there is a good reason for that. It's because it does not. In fact, it is the physical that emerges from consciousness. And this is where the ancient Veda describes it as Maya. But Maya doesn't mean that the physical, the material is an illusion. Maya means that the physical and the material are made out of consciousness, but they appear to us as being something physical and material. Now, this is a radical, kind of unusual explanation. One can say, but the table is real, the chair is real, the stars, the planets are real. Yes, they are real, but they are real from a certain level of perception. From the sensory level, they feel like that. From the intellectual level, they are different. If you use different instruments and you dive deeper into reality, you find that you have a different reality. So we are seeing things from a very narrow, small perspective when we look at them only through the senses. The reality is that consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is the reality that manifests as the infinite diversity of the universe. And this is, of course, not something new. It has been mentioned as part of the Advaita Vedanta. So in the Vedantic literature, consciousness is described as one reality. Many philosophers and thinkers throughout the ages have also come to this conclusion, even modern scientists, as we have said. In the Greeks, Parmenides, in the modern times, you have Spinoza, you have different people who have said that this is the reality. Now, how can this be? This is the main question. And this is what I have spent my life researching under the guidance of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And one of the things that I have had the honor and pleasure to present to the ICC and to the Honorable Dr. Sachin and all the others with him is the relationship between the dynamics of consciousness, which is available in the Veda, and the actual physical structure of the body, and have shown a one-to-one correlation between how consciousness manifests and how the body is constructed, showing that there is one set of dynamics, of laws of nature, that manifest on the level of awareness, on the mind, on consciousness, and it's the same natural laws of nature that manifest in the physical body. The question remained, how is this possible? Because it is a hard problem. This can sound like a theory that is based on belief. You have to believe in it because it is like that. And so that is not satisfying. We want to see if it makes sense. We want to see if it works. We want to see how the one consciousness manifests as the multiplicity of creation, how the unmanifest field of pure being appears in so many multiple, infinite number of forms. And this is what I describe in this book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, that I hope you will find interesting and go through it. It describes that actually consciousness is one field, but because it is conscious, it generates three perspectives on itself. These three perspectives are the perspectives of the observer, the observed, and the process of observation. So to be conscious, you have to be conscious of something. And that thing is an object. The observer, the seer, the knower is the observer, is the conscious individual being conscious. And there is something that connects the individual observer to the object of observation. And that is the link between the observer and the object, and that is the process of observing. What this generates is a point of view, a perspective on consciousness, which is one field, yet because of its nature of being conscious, it generates three flavors within the one field of consciousness. Now, these flavors have their own perspectives. So you can now look at reality from the perspective of the observer, from the perspective of the process of observation, or from the perspective of the object of observation. And these new perspectives generate layers and layers of perspectives, which I call a cascade of perspectives. And that leads to an infinite number of perspectives. So in the unmanifest field of life, there is a field of all possibility. And that field of all possibilities is all a field of perspective, of point of view, of it being able to look at itself from all these different cascades of possible perspectives. Then something happens that allows this multiple, infinite number of perspectives to actually manifest. And that is another hurdle to solve, and something that is also explained, and it needs some steps of understanding and steps of logic, which are explained in that book, that show how from the unmanifest field of all possibilities, manifestation actually emerges. And so the logic is very, very solid, and it is testable. It is also testable because we have technologies of consciousness that allows us to change the physiology through mental procedures. And these technologies come from the Vedic tradition also, such as transcendental meditation, as brought to light by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, that allows the mind to settle down towards that unified field that we talked about and experience pure consciousness, which is the source of the self. And the reason a human being can do that is because it has within it all the dynamics of consciousness. And that brings us back to the research of Veda and Vedic literature in the human physiology, which is another topic that I had the pleasure to present to the audience in 2012 and 2014, as I have been reminded, which was a wonderful time to be with you. Basically, what I'm saying is there is one field, one unbounded field of pure consciousness. That field, which is not physical and not material, is a field of all possibilities, reflecting on itself, curving back on itself, prakritim swam avashtabhya visrijami puna puna. Curving back onto myself, I create again and again and again. And that is perspective upon perspective upon perspective. And of course, during this short time, the presentation does not allow me to go into greater detail, and it might appear a bit abstract. But the reality is to share with you that actually consciousness is primary. And consciousness is what appears as matter. Matter is real from different levels of perspectives. It is real on some level. It is more deeply real on a different level. On a different level, it can be seen to be forces and fields. On a deeper level, it can be seen as one unified field. And on a deeper level, it is found to be pure consciousness. If you practice transcendental meditation through this mental technique, you get changes in the physiology. Through consciousness, you have a transformation in the way the nervous system works, and you see that there is greater coherence, that there is greater ability to connect between right side, left side, front side, and back side of the brain. And these are evidence-based, studied research with researchers and published in the best journals with peer reviews and repeated many times, that show that actually there is a transformation in the nervous system's functioning, which influences the way the whole body works through what we call the neuroendocrine axis, which is the nervous system influencing the hormonal system. The hormonal system is the system that influences the entire functioning of the body's metabolism and different functions of growth and development, and through that to influence the immune system. So there is a direct also connection and testability on that level, and we have also shown that when a group of people practices this program together, there are changes in society, so that goes beyond just the physical limitations of the individual body. They change actually the structure and functioning of society. And these studies also has been repeated many times that show that whenever a group large enough practices these programs together, which means bring their awareness to a deep level within themselves of consciousness, they are influencing what we call the collective consciousness of society. And as the collective consciousness of society rises and is awakened and is more rested, it is less stressed, and therefore as a result you have less crime, less conflicts, less problems, improvement in social indicators, improvement in economy. And this again has been repeated many times and has been also published in peer-reviewed research papers and journals, that again shows how important consciousness is, and that is actually through consciousness that we can create individual well-being, because on the personal level there is decreased anxiety, decreased depression, there is improvement in all levels of performance, better sleep, a reduction in bad behavior, better relationships. And when I'm saying these just like that, it's not just to throw, words, but every one of these words have been studied scientifically and repeatedly with control groups and compared to other techniques that shows that life truly can blossom to be lived on the full value, where we can say truly aham brahmasmi, I am totality, I am wholeness, because sarvam kalvidam brahm, everything is wholeness, everything is totality. And that is the true nature of life. For me, that was a huge discovery of understanding, guided by Maharishi, and then my research on this field with his guidance, showing really that the other aspect of understanding, the understanding that it's the physical matter that is primary, the understanding that material value is primary, this is where the illusion is. This is where the true Maya is. So without rejecting matter, we know that matter is an experience in consciousness, and that it simply appears as such because of our limitation in our physical apparatus. But our physical apparatus is pure enough, good enough, basically well enough, if we remove the stresses and strains and distortions from it, that it can transcend, which means go beyond, and experience pure consciousness, experience the one unbounded field of consciousness which is within us, and know that we are totality, we are Brahman, we are wholeness. And that is the true essence of life, that is the true course of life and the true goal of life. What this allows us to do is answer many, many fundamental questions in life that have not been fully answered yet throughout modern history and ancient times. Of course, there are the rules and guidance in different levels, but the problems about freedom and determinism, are we truly free? Are we determined by the laws of nature? Is destiny and fate are on top of us, or we have a choice to make a difference? The cause for suffering, where is the origin of evil, why there is evil? And these are very important questions that we can answer in a way that allows us to surmount them, the difficulties, and understand the true purpose of life, which is to grow in enlightenment and to grow in bliss and happiness. But we have to really have a foundation in order to be able to understand this fully. And this foundation is the original, the primary assumption that we have is, in the modern times, is wrong, that everything is material, everything is physical. This is the Maya. The reality, consciousness is the primary value. It is consciousness that manages the appearance and allows itself to appear as different values. And therefore, working from the field of consciousness, we have the ability to really transform life. Working on the surface level, all we find is differences and difficulties and people fighting each other because of differences, because they forget that the sap in the tree is what creates the branches, the leaves, the flowers, the petals, and all that is in the tree, and the fruits ultimately come from the sap, which is in the field. It is hidden in the roots. And the roots of life, the field of life, is pure consciousness. And this is what creates all the beautiful diversity that can be truly harmonious and truly create perfection in life if we nourish the sap, if we water the root of life. You water the root of the tree, which are hidden, and you enjoy all the fruits of the tree. You enjoy the fullness of the tree. So if you forget the roots, then the tree will fall apart and you don't have what you want to have. And so therefore, there is a technology that comes with this knowledge, a technology of consciousness that allows us to develop the full potential of life, remove the stresses and strains on the individual level, and find unity at the basis of diversity, so that all differences are here to nourish life and to allow life to blossom in its variety and its beauty and its richness of diversity. But then we find that we are all ultimately one consciousness, and therefore that is the basis of unity. And this is not enough to do just on an intellectual level. It is something one can experience. One can actually experience directly through one's awareness and flourish in oneself and make it flourish in society. So it is a great joy to be with you. Our thoughts are, as Dr. Ram also said, with all those who today face difficulties, in particular, of course, in India today, at this time, it is very acute. Our love and feelings and prayers and support from all fields of life go with all that is happening, and hoping and wishing and knowing that it will be overcome and life will come back, and hope that there will be no suffering anymore and this pandemic is resolved as soon as possible, particularly for India this time, but of course for the whole world, for every family and for every parent, every brother and sister and mother and grandmother and child and grandchild who have suffered directly or indirectly. Our thoughts are with them, and we know that if we improve consciousness and awareness, then we will have quick solutions, better decision making, because we can be acting in the light. Whereas if we are not in higher level of consciousness, we are acting as if we are in the darkness and we don't see the solutions. Often they are right there in front of us. Thank you very much, and it's my joy to be with you.